Well, hello there. Welcome back. We are now on episode 12 of the War, Sports, Politics, and Dragons podcast. And as always, I am David the Nerd Emperor and will be your host. Good afternoon, good evening, folks, and thank you very much for tuning in. Really appreciate having you by. We're wrapping up an interesting news week. We're going to talk about a few things here, but real quick, we're growing. Spread the word. Help me increase my numbers to qualify for a sponsor. We are now on not just Spotify, where we got our start. We are on Amazon, Audible, and iHeartRadio, too. Others are coming soon. We're on Twitter at the WSPD Podcast. We're on YouTube at the WSPD Podcast. We're on Instagram at the WSPD Pod, and on Patreon, it's patreon.com/WSP Dragons, and that is a work in progress. If you want to help us improve our tech, Cash App is WSPD Pod. Sure would appreciate your help. In the meantime, let's get on with the show. The first thing we're going to talk about is the morons in the Associated Press, and it's things like this that make me really not proud, I'll say, of my time as a sports writer, because I was around people who, you know, not at the paper where I worked, but there have been people who simply just don't get it. Okay, there's just no way to describe it otherwise. And I'm trying to find the comment that was made on Twix by the Associated Press, and I just found it. I'm not reading this article because, quite honestly, it's written by people with room temperature IQs. The U.S. is not alone, the header reads, in grappling with diversity in winter sports. In Europe, immigration from Africa and the Middle East has rapidly changed the demographics of the top winter sports countries. That won't be reflected in their rosters for the Milan Cortina Winter Olympics. Okay, well. And my response on Twix was, gosh, it's almost as if the 70 IQ savages that are emigrating into cooler European areas from their sub-Saharan hothouse third world shithole nations of origins don't really want to assimilate. Imagine my surprise. Isn't that crazy? That people who come there for the benefits and are basically a form of jihad by migration. There's a term for it, but I can't remember the term in Arabic for what they're doing, but it's basically jihad by migration. I'll look the term up later on. And that's what's happening in Europe. Europe has fallen. So for those of you that had plans to visit there, don't. You're not going to like it. Having seen footage from Paris in particular, and from friends who've been in Paris, and one person I know that lives in Rouen, which is a town to the west of Paris. Yeah, it ain't good, folks. It ain't good. And quite honestly, it ain't going to get any better. But the Associated Press is worried about diversity on the team because, as we all know, it's not about who's good enough to make the Olympic team. It's about who's black enough or Asian enough or woman enough to make the Olympic team. And of course, the same argument comes from people who don't know what a woman is. So, yeah. In regular news, Washington Post has announced that 300 or so layoffs are coming as sports is basically being dumped from the newspaper for a focus on politics and national security instead. So that means that the formerly great newspaper in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, which produced such writers as Shirley Povich, Michael Wilbon, Tony Kornheiser. I want to say Thomas Boswell also wrote for the Washington Post, but I may be wrong about that. And I want to say George Will as well, but he's not a baseball writer. And I think they carried his stuff in syndication. I think he actually was officially employed by the Sacramento Bee. I may be wrong about that. But there are so many great bylines that have been had in the sports section of the Washington Post over the years. And instead, as someone said on Twix, it's going to be just like Axios and Politico and The Hill and 100 others. Puck News. Now, Dylan Byers, whom I'm familiar with, we haven't met or anything. I don't know him. But Dylan Byers is someone whose stuff I've browsed at from time to time. His name's one of the bylines in the story. He was basically calling it an extinction event for the Washington Post. That's accurate. That's accurate. They're just going to become a glorified left-wing political blog now. And hey, who doesn't want to read yet another 700 or 800 column inches of left-wingers bloviating about how bad that orange man is? Gosh, we don't hear any of that in our daily routines. Let's see if we can't have more of that crammed down our frickin' throats. In New York City, where radical socialists pushed for exorbitant spending that created a deficit on the watch of the previous mayor, Eric Adams, well, the new administration under Ugandan communist Zoran Mamdani is now claiming they're facing a $12 billion deficit because of overspending on the part of the previous administration. Well, it was people like you that agitated for it, so it's at least 50% your fault. But of course, Mamdani is floating tax hikes on the rich, quote unquote. Let me tell you a little story about a certain tax on the rich. Okay? We're going to talk about telephones real quick. Back in 1898, in the harbor of Havana, Cuba, sorry, I had to take a drink of water. In the harbor of Havana, Cuba, and by the way, let me apologize again for the background noise. It's still colder than a well digger's butt here, and I've still got that extra heater running here in the office. The battleship Maine exploded. Now, subsequent research has learned that basically there was a fire source that was kept way too close to a common wall that shared one side. The opposite side of the wall from the flame was a powder magazine. Now, as you may recall from my story about brass monkeys the other day, a magazine is where you would store your cannonballs and your powder to fire those cannonballs. Or in this case, they were gun shells because the guns were different in 1898 than they were in 1808. But that's neither here nor there. Suffice to say, there was a large amount of heat being generated that pretty much bled through this wall, and they think possibly detonated the powder in the magazine, and that's what caused the USS Maine to sink. Well, that didn't really stop the media here in America, who said that it was an act of sabotage and basically wagged the dog enough and created enough headlines. It's the term for what they were doing was called yellow journalism, to convince the administration of the president at the time, who was William McKinley. He would end up being assassinated 3 years later as he started his second term and replaced by Theodore Roosevelt. Well, the McKinley administration declared war on Spain. Now, granted, it happened at a time when Spain's empire was pretty much crumbling. They had at once controlled a vast portion of Western and Southern North America, as well as Mexico, Central America, and basically the western 75% of South America, along with the Philippines, Cuba, and a number of other islands and territories hither, thither, and yon around the globe. Well, in the 6-month war with the Spanish Empire, the American Navy and Army thoroughly defeated the Spaniards, and that's how we ended up at one point in possession of the Philippine Islands and a number of other places in the Pacific, and how Cuba became I forget if it was an American protectorate or what the situation was with Cuba. But we took all this land away from them, including Cuba. In order to finance the war, which again, it lasted 6 months, the McKinley administration and Congress worked together and levied an excise tax on telephones. Now, what this excise tax was a tax on the rich, because in 1898, only people who were fairly affluent had telephones. They had only been out about 20 years, and they weren't in totally wide use at that point. It would probably take another 20 years before they really hit the mainstream and almost everybody started to get one. So the plan was to fund this, again, 6-month war with this 50 cent per month fee that only the wealthy would pay in 1898. Well, When the war ended, the excise tax stayed. It stayed for quite a while. And by quite a while, I mean it stayed until 2006. It was repealed during the second term of the George W. Bush administration. I can remember seeing it. At that point, we had Verizon for a landline. I can remember seeing this 50-cent tax on my phone bill back when we had Verizon when we were first married. I don't now because Verizon costs a freaking arm and a leg. So 108 years. The excise tax stayed on the books for 108 years to pay for a war that lasted 6 months, because it was originally floated as a tax on the rich. So I can guarantee you that whatever the socialist Ugandan jackass Mamdani does to raise taxes on the, quote, rich, unquote, in New York City, it will stay. It will eventually affect people in lower income brackets. And by the time, in due time, I'll say, in due time, it will become a tax on everyone, because that's how it works out. It's worked out like that countless times before. I'm just showing you one example of a very small tax. There are tons of other ones. And quite honestly, someone should have gone back in time to 1913 and shot Woodrow Wilson in the head, because he was one of the driving forces behind the 16th Amendment, which gave us personal income tax. Before 1916, when that amendment got passed, that was the 16th Amendment. Okay, there were two amendments that got passed during the administration of Woodrow Wilson that were absolute garbage. And to be honest, there are two more that some might consider debatable, but I'm not going to debate the 19th. I think it's okay that women have the right to vote. I don't have a problem with that. I just think that women should vote for more sensible candidates, because all y'all ladies voting for liberals, you need to have your friggin' heads examined. But anyway, the 16th Amendment was graduated income tax. The 18th Amendment was prohibition, and we see how well that ended up. That's the only constitutional amendment that has ever been repealed once passed. And hopefully that will stay that way. But the 17th, which allows people at the state level to vote directly in elections for U.S. senators, was passed as well. And there's been some ongoing debate over the wisdom of that. I personally am okay with it. But again, there are a number of constitutional amendments that don't really make a whole lot of sense. And the 16th and the 18th and the 21st, none of them should exist. Because without the 18th, you wouldn't need the 21st. Okay, so Don Lemon is our next subject. Good old Donnie boy. Former CNN host who got let go because he wasn't making them any money. And let's be honest, that's the reason, because, as we all know, Inslee's first rule of business is very simple. It's 10 words, and it's universally true everywhere in human history. All business decisions at their core are financial in nature. Okay? If you're letting someone go, it's because you don't think that person's going to help you make money. If you let someone go, it's because you think they're going to lose you money. If you change how much toilet paper is used in the bathrooms, it's because you think it will save you money. If you change the type of boxes that you put a Big Mac in, you think it's because it will save you money running a McDonald's. These are very simple things to figure out. All businesses, except the federal government, which isn't a business. The federal government is a corrupt middleman that skims money off of projects and then mismanages them. All businesses have to do things like that in order to stay solvent. So, there you have it. Now, Don Lemon was arrested in Los Angeles last night. What did Mr. Lemon do, you ask? Well, for those of you that have been paying attention to what he had been doing, he took part in what they were trying to call a protest, but realistically, it was a crime. He and a bunch of his left-wing lunatic buddies burst into a church in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and immediately began harassing the churchgoers driving a lot of them out of the church. And basically, it looked to me almost like a negative flipped image of Mississippi burning, where instead of the Klan doing it, it was Don Lemon and a bunch of libtards. Fellow libtards. And he was charged with violations of 18 U.S. Code 241, which is a conspiracy to deprive rights. These are federal charges, by the way. These are not state charges. And 18 U.S. Code 248, the violation of the FACE Act. Apparently terrorizing Christians isn't legal yet. And I sincerely hope that Mr. Lemon, whom I've also heard has already been released and is now basically waiting for trial, has a good time in prison. He's certainly earned it. We couldn't kill people like Joseph Goebbels after the war because they had already committed suicide. But I think now in this war, now that we're taking prisoners, we should be able to give them some good jail time. And I hope Don gets a nice lengthy stretch. I'm sure that he'll enjoy his time there. Moving on to the religion of peace. There was a horrible development in Nigeria wherein 25 people were killed. Dateline Maiduguri, Nigeria, as of this morning through Reuters, written by Ahmed Kingimi. Ahmed Kingimi. At least 25 people were killed when suspected Boko Haram militants, read Muslim fascist terrorists, attacked a town in northern Nigeria, relatives of victims said. The deadliest reportedly Islamist attack since U.S. President Donald Trump ordered airstrikes on Christmas Day. The victims were laborers who had traveled to Sabongari town in northeastern Nigeria's Borno state to work at a construction site. When gunmen swept in on Thursday and opened fire, relatives Hassan Usman and Awal Isa told Reuters. Alyun Dume, a senator who represents the region, said he was shocked and saddened by the killing of his constituents. In a separate militant attack, and I hate the use of the word militant because they're scared to death to use the word terrorist. When you look up the dictionary term for militant, it implies someone who wants to be involved in a conflict, who is attempting military action of some sort. That is war. What they're doing is not a war. What they're doing is terrorism. It is violence and intimidation to achieve a political end. It is not combat. When you are militant, you are expecting combat. Combat implies an exchange of hostilities from both sides involved. When you walk into an encampment of people doing construction work and start shooting them, that is not a war, that is a terrorist attack. So in a separate terrorist attack, also on Thursday in Borno, at least 9 soldiers and 2 members of a civilian task force assisting them were killed by fighters who launched a pre-dawn assault on an army base. Maybe that can be considered a militant attack, but as they're not wearing military uniforms and they're not recognized as members of any official sovereign state, they're also what's called illegal combatants under the Geneva and Hague Conventions of War. And quite honestly, we can strip them naked and leave them in the sun to die if we wanted to, because they don't get any of the protections of those conventions regarding the rules of war if they're unlawful combatants. And quite honestly, I think that we should go Roman on people like that. But I'm not in charge. You're probably glad I'm not in charge, because you'd have low taxes, but there'd be a whole lot of dead Islamofascists. 16 people were also wounded in that attack that killed 9. Borno, where Boko Haram and Islamic State West Africa Province fighters have intensified attacks on military convoys and civilians, remains the epicenter of the 17-year Islamist insurgency. Nigeria, plagued by Islamist attacks and mass kidnappings, is under additional pressure to restore security since Trump accused it last year of failing to protect Christians. U.S. forces struck what they described as terrorist targets on December 25th, and the Nigerian authorities say they're cooperating with Washington to improve security. So we'll see how that turns out, but I'm not terribly optimistic. It's just such a damn shame. Now, moving back over here on our hemisphere to the state of Virginia, which is now going, I guess, to be known like Maryland as the People's Republic. Virginians this is reported by Fox News. I'm not a fan of reporting stuff from Fox News because I used to call them the four-story news, because that's about all they can handle covering in a given day, about 4 different topics. And I personally find that pathetic, for want of a better term. Your small local newspaper will have 30 to 40 articles, each about a different topic, and you're a multi-billion-dollar news network, and you can only talk about 4 different things all day. Yeah, it's because you beat them to death, you bludgeon people over the head with the same crap all the time, and that's why I don't rely on network news sources. But anyway, Virginians are in a state of disbelief, according to Eric Doherty, after a jaw-dropping wave of tax hikes are pushed by elected Democrats. The tax hikes include taxes on dog walking and grooming, guns and ammo, which that's going to get thrown out of court probably because you can't tax a right, storage facility usage, dry cleaning, home repairs, leaf blowers, and landscaping. So now if you buy a leaf blower, they're going to tack on an extra tax to it, because why not? And then for retail delivery. So I really hope that all these people that voted for Abigail CIA Burger and Jay, I'll shoot your kids Jones, are happy that they're now reaping what they've sown. As I wrote when I sent in a tax check in 1995, vote Democrat, watch taxes double. Just sad state of affairs, but hey. Moving over to sports real quick, we're heading to Canton, Ohio, where Adam Schefter is reported on a press release from the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The Pro Football Hall of Fame, the news release reads, understands and respects the passionate reaction of many fans, media members, and enshrinees of the Hall itself in light of published reports regarding the voting results for the class of 2026. It's that very passion that propels the game. The Hall also respects the members of the selection committee when they follow the selection process bylaws. It's an honor to serve as a selector. Each year, the Hall reviews the selection process and the composition of a 50-person selection committee. If it is determined that any member or members violated the selection process bylaws, they understand action will be taken. Now, Terrell Owens, a wide receiver who played for the 49ers, the Cowboys, and a couple of other teams, saw this and said, well, where were you guys in 2017 when you violated bylaws to keep me out of the Hall of Fame? So this is an ongoing matter of debate. And quite honestly, I had a discussion with a friend of mine, former coworker in the news business this morning about it. And places like the Cooperstown, which is, of course, the Pro Baseball Hall of Fame, and Canton, the local chambers of commerce get upset if a certain number of people don't get voted in because they rely on the tourist money to help support the community. And I think that's pathetic. But I live in an area where tourism counts a lot with all these jackasses and entitled individuals. I'll tone it down. That's as far as I'll go. The Tourons, when they head to the beach, when they turn into rabid sheep who have to go see sand and pay $12 for an order of French fries. Each year, the Hall reviews the selection process. I read that already. That could include the possibility that such selectors, talking about people who have violated the bylaws, would not remain a member of the committee moving forward. The selection of a new class is the most important duty the Hall of Fame oversees each year, and the integrity of that process cannot be in question. Well, buddy, I got some news for you. With Bill Belichick getting snubbed, it's in question. So, suck it up. And let's see, we've talked about Don Lemon. We've talked about the new Virginia taxes, where Virginia already has annual, I think, taxes on owning an automobile and a television and crap like that, certain assets over a certain dollar value. So It doesn't surprise me that Virginia's doing it. I can remember having an in-law from, God, this has been 20 years, saying, you think you got taxes in Maryland? Virginia, you would think they had invented them there. So now we're going to head back up to Minnesota where all that fun's going on as the Democrats are paying people to riot to distract the world from all the rampant fraud that they've been committing. The latest attempted distraction, of course, is the attack on Minnesota Congress communist Ilhan Omar, where a man who was conveniently sitting about 6 feet away from her right in the front row while she gave a speech wasn't a member of the press who usually sit up front, wasn't a member of friends or immediate family who often sit up front. Now, it was just some random scruffy dude who looked like he'd been out of work for 4 days or hadn't shaved in 4 days. You know, is just sitting there. And at one point, you see her look at him and nod. And then suddenly, he stands up, pulls out a syringe, and squirts most of the contents of the syringe at her. Now, if I'm a public figure and somebody gets up and squirts something at me, I'm going to recoil. And security's going to grab the guy, and so on and so forth. Oh, not old Ms. Omar. She decided that, hey, if I'm strong enough of character to marry my husband and violate immigration laws, by God, I'm the daughter of a man who worked for a brutal Somali warlord. I have a reputation to uphold. I have a non-existent winery that I'm responsible for that's worth $5 million. I have commitments to society, and my dignity matters more than my life. That's what she actually said in a comment to someone on Twix this morning. So I'm going to go after him, which makes her the very first person possibly in the history of such assaults to do so. And of course, the immediate response from many people, and I have seen people on both sides of the political aisle say this, is the whole damn thing looks staged. Okay, you look at the video, you can see her look at him and nod briefly, and suddenly he's up and about doing his thing. And what he sprayed her with turned out to be apple cider vinegar. Oh, gosh, golly. Yeah, because, you know, if I'm going to assault a member of Congress, I'm going to use vinegar. I mean, maybe she's a douche, I get that. But, no. Come on, guys. The only thing that would have been any more ridiculous would have been if he had used deionized water. Okay? Didn't use anything harmful, won't stain your clothes. It just smells a little bit like vinegar. And it'll wash right out. But the typical response for somebody squirting a substance at a member of Congress is that paramedics get involved. Hazmat is called. There are procedures for all this. And a lot of them were circumvented because she's just so tough. Like I said, anybody tough enough to marry her own kin, hey, cool. Good luck, girl. So we're just going to call her Jussie Somalia from now on. That's her new nickname. Jussie Somalia, I think, fits. And she's earned it. She's fought long and hard for it. And again, what this is a staged attempt to make her look brave and persecuted and make her out to be the victim that she is not, so that the masses won't pay attention to the investigation that's unveiling. So far, the number I'm hearing is $19 billion with a B dollars of fraudulent use of our taxpayer money. $19 billion. Okay? How many school lunches would that buy? Well, it was supposed to be buying a couple thousand a week for at least one place in Minneapolis, but when the feds staked the place out and counted heads, whereas they were supposed to be giving out 4,000 meals a day, they had 40 people show up. So about 1%, which to me pretty much echoes the success rate of federal government. So why do we need so much of it again? There has to be some point at which we start paying less taxes. There has to be. But what do I know? I'm just somebody who's footing the bill for the federal government. It's not like I have a role in anything. Now, we're moving along, and this is not going to be one of our longer podcasts. I can tell you that. Had a lot of stuff going on in the last couple of days, and have just not had the time to write out a couple of things I was hoping to get written out for the show. But I am going to take us into the realm of movies now. For those of you that have ever seen the film The Passion of the Christ, it was directed by Mel Gibson, came out, it's been some time now, I want to say 2006. Starred Jim Caviezel playing Jesus Christ. And I'm reading this thing on Twix about this, and I've looked into this, and this turns out this is actually true. So here's the wild part about the filming of The Passion of the Christ. Did you know, this is how the tweet starts, did you know Jim Caviezel was struck by lightning while hanging on the cross for the movie The Passion of the Christ? During the filming of the movie, Jim Caviezel, who played Jesus, suffered immensely. He dislocated his shoulder at one point while he was carrying the cross. He was whipped by accident, because you know in the movies they're not going to actually whip the actor with a scourge that draws blood. They're going to, fake it. Anybody who's seen the scene from The Godfather where Sonny is beating up his sister's husband because the husband hit his sister, okay, the guy's where Sonny's sister got beat up, it's Talia Shire plays the sister. And the guy that beat up Talia Shire, is it Paul Newman? Or Jimmy Caan? It's James Caan, is beating the crap out of this guy, throwing garbage cans at him, and just generally laying waste to this dude. You can actually see one punch where he throws a right cross, and it doesn't come within 6 inches of the guy's face. Okay? It's just, they kept it in because they're like, screw it, people might notice it, they might not, doesn't matter. It's a fight scene, whatever. Well, he was whipped. Jim Caviezel was actually whipped by accident, and if you get hit with a whip, I got hit with a whip once when I was a kid. Thankfully, it was a small one, and it didn't have a barb or anything on the end of it. It was just a piece of leather thong, and it stung like all hell, and it left a small cut. Now, imagine getting hit by something bigger. So anyway, filming the crucifixion alone took 5 weeks of agony. Okay, and during the filming, Caviezel hung exposed in freezing conditions. He ended up getting pneumonia. He suffered from hypothermia. Okay, he had to have significant medical attention during all of this. After filming, the toll taken on his heart had been so severe, he underwent 2 open heart surgeries. Okay, but the most terrifying moment happened during the Sermon on the Mount scene. He was struck by lightning, not once, but twice. Witnesses said his head glowed like a torch for a split second. He survived, but suffered a lot. Caviezel later said, quote, "I didn't want people to see me. I just wanted them to see Jesus." Conversions happened on that set, then worldwide. Sometimes art imitates life. Sometimes heaven interferes with art. So there's a story about that. That to me is absolutely fascinating. Now, there was another account here on Twix that had not a question, but it was a request. And it said, hit me with the harshest reality truth. And here's the response. Whoops, hold on. I just accidentally deleted the bookmark, so it totally fell off of my timeline, and now I've got to go back to it. I can't find it. Hold on, let's see. I remember a couple of the words from it, so let me see if I can find what I'm looking for here. Sorry about this. I clicked the wrong key and now we're having some problems. Here we go. Okay, so the response came from the account that calls itself Malcolm Flex. And here's what Malcolm Flex said. Hit me with the harshest reality truth was the request. And here's the response. And I want you to think about this because, and then I'll tell you a story about the movie The Terminator. In 10,000 years, your country won't exist. The borders will be dissolved, and your language will be extinct or unrecognizable. Your digital footprint will be gone, and data will rot faster than stone. Most of what's defined us today, money, politics, status, and online lives, will vanish without context. What survives will be fragments, misread, mythologized, guessed at, and wrong. The uncomfortable truth is this: human certainty is an illusion built on missing data. We don't know where we truly came from. We don't know how many civilizations rose, advanced, and quietly reset before us. As history shows us, it isn't a straight line of progress. It's a series of collapses, with survivors writing the story. And we don't know if we're evolving or just approaching another reset. That's profound. That's very profound. Now, someone else typed the same thing in under a different username, but that's the one that I went with. Now, here's a quick tweet that I bookmarked 3 days ago. Didn't get a lot of chance to talk about this, but this is about the agitator Alex Pretty, who now video 11 days before he was shot in a scuffle with ICE. Video has emerged from January 13th. The incident that involved his death took place on January 24th. January 13th footage shows him screaming obscenities at ICE law enforcement officers and then spitting at them and kicking the taillight out of an SUV they were riding around in, whereupon there was a scuffle, and supposedly at that point he got thrown to the ground. I didn't see the rest of it because the camera pans away. But there you go. So this is from Donnie Cope. He says, the parents of Alex Pretty say their son quit his hospital job months ago and had shown unusual behavior recently. He seemed to have joined some kind of group. We warned him 2 weeks ago, protest if you want, but don't engage, don't do anything stupid, his father told reporters. He said he understood, but it wasn't until police pulled messages from Alex's phone that the truth began to emerge, and what investigators found. It seems that Pretty's parents didn't want him participating. It seems he allegedly scrubbed his social media presence one day prior to actions leading to his death. When you make decisions based on emotions, you make poor decisions. He made bad decisions. I'm a 2A absolutist, this man says. You have a right to carry, not a privilege, but rights come with restrictions. You need your ID and your permit on you. Reports say Pretty had neither, so he was not carrying legally. And that's just the way it is. Now, there's another account on here that I've read out before, L.H. Gray. And this account tends to write some rather lengthy diatribes. And this one is probably how we're going to wrap things up today, because this is going to take me a few minutes to get through. And it'll put us at about 45 minutes. And at that point, I think I'm good. Let me find it again. All right. Here we go. You keep comparing Trump to Hitler, ICE to the Gestapo, and America to 1930s Germany. Fine, let's play your game. Let's see what actually happens if the mask slips and your nightmare becomes real. Imagine the switch flips overnight. Trump doesn't tweet anymore. He speaks once, calmly, on every screen at once. No more campaigns, no more debates, no more appeals to voters. Just orders. Congress is dissolved for the duration of the emergency. The courts are reorganized. The media outlets that spent years calling him Hitler are shuttered in a single dawn raid. Transmitters smashed, editors vanished. The ones that remain read only what the new Ministry of Truth provides. ICE, no longer bureaucracy and windbreakers, steps out in crisp black uniforms with silver death's heads on the collars. This is somewhere between weird and hilarious. The transformation is deliberate, theatrical, unmistakable. They don't hide the symbolism, they revel in it. The message is simple. Resistance is obsolete. And you're first. Not because you're the biggest threat. You're not. You're soft, disorganized, addicted to validation and dopamine hits from likes and retweets. You're first because you're loud, visible, and already self-identified. The regime needs examples early while the memory of freedom is still fresh. Terror works best when people can still remember what they lost. They come for you at 4 a.m. No warrants, no live streams, no body cams. Black vans, no plates, doors kicked in. You're dragged out in whatever you slept in, zip-tied, hooded. Your phones are confiscated and bricked on the spot. Your social media accounts are wiped. The algorithm no longer knows you exist. The holding facilities aren't the border detention centers you love to scream about. Those were holiday camps compared to what's built now. They're repurposed warehouses in the middle of nowhere, ringed with razor wire and watchtowers. No NGOs, no lawyers, no press tours. You're stripped, hosed down with ice water, issued a gray jumpsuit with a number. Your name is never spoken again. Interrogation is methodical. They already have everything. Your posts, your group chats, your donor list, your face from 1,000 cameras. They just want you to admit what you are. Most of you break fast. You were never trained for this. You thought courage was a hashtag. You denounce your friends for a crust of bread and a blanket. The ones who don't break disappear deeper. No trials, no headlines, just silence. The lucky ones get shipped to the new labor camps springing up in the desert. Guards who've been told you're traitors, terrorists, enemies of the people. A beating for looking up, a bullet for trying to run. The unlucky ones are made examples on live broadcasts. Not many, just enough. A show trial that lasts 20 minutes. Then the public execution streamed in high def so everyone understands the new rules. Within 6 months, the resistance is a ghost story, whispered by people who no longer dare say your names. And the streets? Quiet. Just order and fear. That, you stupid, comfortable, historically illiterate fucks, is what actual authoritarianism looks like. Not mean tweets, not fascist rhetoric to hurt your feelings, not even mass deportations of illegal immigrants, which, by the way, most of the country supports. You take for granted the right to call the president a tyrant to his face, to burn the flag, to riot without being shot in the street, and you think that proves the tyranny is already here. You have no idea how good you have it. You have no idea how fast it can all vanish. So keep rioting, keep smashing, keep comparing your democratic disappointments to the fucking Shoah. Just understand this. The real thing, when it comes, will not announce itself with a Trump tweet. It will arrive in the dark with vans and lists. And by then, no one will be left to hear you scream. That's a very good point. Stalin did remarkably similar things in the Soviet Union. They had their vans or trucks or cars. They had their lists. They had their quiet prisons like the Lubyanka in Moscow. They had what was called by Alexander Solzhenitsyn the Gulag Archipelago, which was basically these little islands of punishment scattered throughout the Soviet Union. Almost all of them in some of the most inhospitable climates you could freaking imagine. Many of them up above the Arctic Circle, where people were slowly worked to death and never came home. Some did after a while, after their teeth had been knocked out, after their noses had been broken so many times that they were permanently in the wrong angle, after their eyes were gouged out, after their ears were cut off. Yeah, some of them came back, but not too many. And the ones that came back, they were still considered suspects because they had already been in the system. So to those of you that are out there protesting about Trump being a fascist, you haven't a damn clue what you're talking about. And for those of us that do know what people are capable of when fascism actually happens, that's why we don't take your shit seriously. That's why we roll our eyes and maybe ridicule you on social media when you piss and moan about how hard it is you've got it while you're sucking down a $9 Starbucks latte and using a $1,300 iPhone to talk about how capitalism sucks. Okay, while you're using the First Amendment, okay, and the internet to complain about how nobody's voice is heard. that ignorance that you so proudly wave like a rainbow flag, that ignorance is what shields you from learning the truth. Because if you knew the truth, you wouldn't be out doing what you're doing. You'd be home being useful and productive. But some people, they're just brainwashed. They let their TV tell them how to think. They went to college and got indoctrinated. They hang around people who are on way too many SSRIs or drink too much boxed wine or whatever the case may be, and get turned into the good little soldiers that would be more suited to a George Orwell novel than they are to the real world. And I'm ashamed to share a planet with people like that. But just remember, folks, their votes count just as much as yours. Isn't that encouraging? Yeah. We're going to wrap it up with one final note from Canada, reported a few days ago by ViceGrad24 on Twix. And this is about Canadian healthcare. An elderly woman in Canada was euthanized only hours after telling doctors she wanted to live and receive hospice care instead. She had become very ill after heart surgery and was being cared for at home by her elderly husband, who doctors noted was experiencing what they called caregiver burnout. According to an official review, the woman told one assessor she wanted to withdraw her request for assisted death, citing personal and religious values, and asked for hospice care instead. Her hospice placement was quickly denied, and her husband requested an urgent reassessment for assisted dying, saying he could no longer cope with caring for her. She was euthanized that same evening, and by euthanized, I mean she was chemically murdered. They injected her with something that killed her, and so she died. Reviewers later said the short timeline failed to properly examine her true wishes, with the case raising serious questions about Canada's approach to euthanasia. So that's what you get if you need healthcare in Canada. You get the needle. Wild, folks. Absolutely wild. Quick weather update for those of you that live where I live, the middle of the eastern shore of Maryland. It doesn't appear we're going to be getting any snow tomorrow with the storm that's rolling through. I was looking at videos from American Weather Service, Wakefield, Virginia, and the AWS Wakefield account is talking about there being some significant snowfall in the southern portion of Virginia. But again, Maryland is to the north, by and large, of the Old Dominion. So we, here on the shore in particular, looking at the hourly forecast on the weather app, is showing 0 inches of precipitation Saturday. It's showing 0 inches of precipitation on Sunday. I will get it right once I get this Tootsie Roll out of my mouth. So it doesn't look like we're going to get anything this weekend, and for that I'm incredibly grateful. We have just put in another heater in the kitchen to help get the house warmer. It's a terrible situation here with us with the heat. And when this cold snap, this wretched, absurd, atypical, historically cold time ends, then I will be glad. And I can safely say, deep down, I think I prefer summer. Because once my feet get cold in the winter, I can't fall asleep until my feet feel normal temperature or a little bit warm. The rest of me I'm not really worried about. You know, some nights my nose gets cold because the room's a little chilly. But my feet, if my feet get cold, man, just forget it. I can't do anything. I just can't do anything. I'm sitting here now with a little space heater blowing directly at my feet to try to keep my feet warm. The rest of me feels fine, but my feet are like icicles sometimes. And if I spend the whole day with my feet that cold, well, for one thing, the skin's going to crack and dry out and bleed, and it hurts like all hell. But I just can't function if my feet are super cold. So, anyway, to those of you that are struggling to stay warm, I hope you do. My heart goes out to you because I'm right where you are. And for that, I think we're going to do it. I think that's going to wrap us up. Time to say goodbye, folks. Please follow my podcast. Please give me a 5-star rating. I really appreciate all the listens and the comments. I'm getting a few comments here and there. I hope it keeps growing, and I hope you guys can help me keep growing. Leave your own comment if you want. Answer my poll. Interact with the poll. I ask a poll question every day. I respond, all 3 days a week that I do the podcast, I do a poll. I respond to all the reasonable comments, but as always, unreasonable people and trolls can get a life. You can listen to this podcast on Spotify, Amazon, Audible, and iHeartRadio. My email for story and discussion topic suggestions is wspdpod@gmail.com. Please drop me a line. You can donate to help me get better technology. My Cash App is WSPDpod. Please help us get some better tech. I do have a listener has sent me a laptop, which is supposed to arrive possibly today. And, of course, knowing how things work, it'll probably be a week from Thursday, but because I haven't heard the delivery truck come yet. But hopefully that'll come, and when it does, I can start doing video with the podcasts, and it will make them a little bit more entertaining. So there's that. My Twitter handle is at the WSPD Podcast. I do swear a considerable amount on that podcast because I enjoy ridiculing and ripping into the occasional liberal idiot. The problem is they're no longer occasional. The world is carpeted with stupidity, and I keep stepping in it. But anyway, my YouTube is at the WSPD Podcast, patreon.com/WSP Dragons. Instagram is at the WSPD Pod. We are growing. We have some more stuff coming. It's just taking a little longer than I had originally intended. We're having some tech issues, and I'm not a very tech-savvy person, so I've got to bull my way through it. And it always seems like whenever I'm working on something, it has to be the most difficult problem imaginable, and it has to be something where 2 plus 2 would normally equal 4, but as I've said before, 2 plus 2 equals banana a lot. So when 2 plus 2 equals banana, I blow a gasket and I can't figure out what to do. So I'm bullying my way through it, and as Winston Churchill once said, if you find yourself going through hell, keep going. So we're going to keep going. I thank you for listening. Subscribe, spread the word, and help me entertain and annoy more people. This is David the Nerd Emperor signing off. Have a great Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Don't watch the Pro Bowl. It's a joke.